Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn at the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. My name is Andrew O'Brien. I'm an attorney here in town. I'm a board member of the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra and a very proud father of two alumni of the St. Louis Symphony Youth Orchestra. Today, we're going to take a deeper look at the St. Louis Symphony Youth Orchestra. It is one of only a few orchestras in the country that has a youth orchestra embedded in its actual orchestral setup. It's part of the family, which makes it unique. And in today's program, we're going to have three sections. The first will talk about the origins and the beginnings of the St. Louis Symphony Youth Orchestra, which this year celebrated its 50th anniversary, a great milestone. The second section, we will talk with some past members who will tell us about their youth orchestra experience and how music has informed and where it has brought them in their lives. And then lastly, we will talk with current members of the youth orchestra's manager, and a member of the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra who's working closely with the youth orchestra, which happens all the time. It is a great relationship. It is truly a family. In the course of this, we would invite you to ask questions using the chat function throughout today's Lunch and Learn, and we'll take questions from the audience throughout via chat where possible. Before we proceed, I'd like to express our special thanks to the 2021 Classical Series sponsor, the Stewart Family Foundation, the Youth Orchestra presenting sponsors Ameren and Kathleen, the Ameren Corporation and Kathleen Lucas, as well as the Buder Charitable Foundation and ESCO Technologies Foundation, who support youth orchestra scholarships. Finally, our gratitude to the many individuals who donated to celebrate 50 years of the youth orchestra over the past season. And throughout this presentation, you may also hear the youth orchestra referred to as the YO. They're kind of interchangeable. So thank you for joining us today, members of the St. Louis family, and we hope you enjoy the chance to learn more and ask questions and enjoy the experience that is the St. Louis Symphony Youth Orchestra. Well, if we are ready, let's welcome our first guests. Our first guest is Leonard Slatkin, Conductor Laureate of the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, and he founded the youth orchestra when he was assistant conductor here in the 1970s. And then our second guest for this section is Christina Sassy. Christina is the first concertmaster of the youth orchestra, has gone on to perform in orchestras across the country, as well as to teach professionally. She's now on the violin faculty at Washington University, and she also made her most recent appearance with the youth orchestra in January of this year in the 50-year celebration concert. In 2020, the youth orchestra is celebrating 50 years. I'd like to start with you, Leonard and Christine, to get an idea about those first few seasons 50 years ago. Leonard, we mentioned earlier you were assistant conductor when you set out to form the youth orchestra. What inspired you? What were you thinking? What was behind this?
Good afternoon.
Thank you.
I was a product of youth orchestras as a youngster in Los Angeles. I played viola in something called the California Junior Symphony. I played in my junior high and high school orchestras. And I also participated in other orchestras that were existing in the Los Angeles area. So I knew the benefits and the importance of it. The surprise was when I arrived in St. Louis as the assistant, even though there had been attempts to start a citywide youth orchestra, it never came to fruition. So many other thriving communities did have a place, an outlet for young people from around the area to get together, but St. Louis did not. I would say it was probably my first really important outlet to get what I wanted to have happen, and the community got right behind it, and it was extraordinary how quickly we put it all together. It didn't take, in fact, the audition process, I remember hearing about 600 young people, maybe 550 in 5 or 6 weeks. It took a while to weed it out, but once we got started, we stayed on a very good upward trajectory all the way through.
And Leonard, whose idea was it to make the youth orchestra actually integrated into the full symphony orchestra, make it part of
It was mine because I felt it was important to be able to have the facilities of Powell Hall. That's one thing a lot of youth orchestras didn't have around the country. We had this fantastic hall, and I thought, if we're going to attract people from all over, they need to have a place to come, not only to make music with other young people, but something that they could really look forward. I think every young person's reaction, first time they walk into Powell Hall, is, wow. And the idea that they could actually be performing week after week there. But it was also important to establish a relationship with the orchestra for getting master classes, for getting teaching and sectionals. I thought it would be very valuable and important, and it's turned out to be true.
And maybe that's a chance for me to talk to you, Christine, a little bit. You were there at the beginning too. So tell us, how did you find out about the youth orchestra since it was in its beginnings, and how did that start for you, and how did you decide to sign up?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's such a delight to be here. I think everybody in St. Louis knew that there was going to be this youth orchestra and we better audition. It was just the buzz. Everybody knew about it. We were calling one another on the phone and, are you going to audition? Well, what are you going to play? Well, what do you think we're going to have to do for the audition? And it was a tremendous excitement and a wonderful spirit that St. Louis was going to have a youth orchestra that would rehearse at Powell Hall. And talk about exciting. I mean, even now when I go to Powell Hall, it's wow. That excitement has never worn off.
So in that one, tell us a little bit about your journey in the youth orchestra, because I think you assumed the position of concertmaster, and maybe a little bit of what you have done musically since that point.
Sure. Well, I do remember right at the beginning getting this call from Mrs. Hoagland. Do you remember her?
Of course.
Mr. Slatkin, do you remember Edith Hoagland?
She was a force, wasn't she?
Oh, she was. She was. And do you remember her red telephone in her home?
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe she brought you a red apple to every rehearsal.
She did.
Oh, she was an amazing woman. And I remember her calling me and saying, Mr. Slatkin would like for you to play concertmaster. And I said, me? And she said, yes. And I said, oh, I need to get the music right now. And she was just such a gem, no two ways about it. And then, I don't know if you remember this, Mr. Slatkin, but you asked me at one point to come and listen to, there must have been 100 violins. Yep. And we sat down there in Powell Hall and we listened to them one after the other. And after several hours, and I don't know if you remember this, but I do, because it really made an impression on me. You said, do you notice anything about these violinists? And I said, well, some of them who are quite young are very talented. And you attributed that, and I agree, to the Suzuki approach, the Suzuki method. But also, we both noticed that when you asked them to play a scale, they did not use their whole bow.
No.
They just use a part of their bow. And I don't think there is a lesson that I teach nowadays that I don't say, please start at the frog. One more time, please, at the frog. We're going to begin at the frog, then we'll go to the other parts of the bow. I've
come to think there's a better line now, and you can use it for the students. Say, you know, your parents paid for all of it. You might as well use all of it.
Well, get your money's worth out of that rehair.
we could get into the technicalities of practice, which I have never been good at. But let's.
Oh, you practice.
We're here 50 years after you found this orchestra, so it's clearly enduring. I don't want to say a legacy because I believe it will keep going. But what is it about this youth orchestra? What was your vision? Who did you think would be in it at the beginning? And why are we here 50 years later? How has it become so successful in time? You, Leonard?
A lot of credit goes to the people who came after me. My job was just to create it, to establish what I thought would be the guidelines, and to just watch it like a plant, watch it grow. But as my career started to get busier, I couldn't devote as much time as I wanted to the orchestra. So the idea was that unlike almost anything else that a person gets in school, music is a way to bring people together. They communicate in a different way, not using words, just using these sounds. You get to use your ears as the communicative device rather than your mouth. You develop real friendships and attachments. I'd ask Christine, I'm sure there are people who were in that first year who you're still in touch with.
Absolutely.
And all of this, probably I never think the majority of people playing in a youth orchestra are going to go on to become musicians. They might become indeed lawyers, teachers, doctors, whatever, but they have this, and they have something special because what we do in music is more about what touches the soul. It really is. It's a remarkable experience. Hey, I've got something going on here. This isn't good.
You've hearkened the spirits to come join.
Gotta get rid of that. Hold on.
Yeah, Christine. Christine, have you been? Tell us about maybe what you see about the youth orchestra, having been there from the beginning and being part of the community and seen it grow and prosper, and maybe some of the context you've kept. Tell us what you think makes it enduring to the community and to you, I suppose.
Well, truly, the youth orchestra is the treasure of our city, next to the St. Louis Symphony. The youth orchestra, to me, is just filled with these students that have such great life in them and enthusiasm. They play with great abandonment, and the level of playing has exponentially improved since my time. I mean, I can hardly believe the level at which this youth orchestra plays. And it is such a joy to watch. And I've had students that have been members of this orchestra, and each year that I hear about it and I listen and I watch, I just stand in amazement at what has happened over the past 50 years.
It's true. It was difficult at first because we didn't know what the level was going to be. So I had to guess in terms of putting programs together. But after the first year, it became clear what it could be. And as my time as conductor, at least, continued, we became more adventurous. I never wanted to play down with the young people. I always made sure that we played not arrangements of anything, not simplified versions. We always played the works as they existed for the concert orchestra, or that the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra themselves would be playing. And what's happened now is the orchestra, after all this time, continues to grow, take on more challenges, touring, more visibility for the public. I think there's nothing that makes me prouder than knowing how well it's done since the time I left.
And at the beginning, I know, Christine, was there right now, as I've been more directly involved in the last 10 years, and there's a very healthy relationship between the musicians and the members of the youth orchestra. It's fantastic, and I think it's an allure for the youth orchestra because they're seeing and they're around people that are like role models and they want to learn from. Was that something that developed over time, or was that there from the beginning, this connection between the actual symphony orchestra and the youth orchestra musicians?
Yeah, I don't remember a lot of coaching by members of the St. Louis Symphony. I remember a side-by-side. We might have had one coaching, a one sectional, but it was always just such a treasure to be there and have lots of coaching. I mean, even the musicians coming in and out from rehearsing, they were very encouraging and talked to us about the repertoire. And so it was just such a great relationship really from the start.
That's great, because I do know I'm seeing some questions here about auditioning and stuff, and I know it has changed over time, but I think I let the questions about auditioning sit in the last section, and the current YO manager can maybe give us a recap on that. But I think to your point, would you say it's evolved?
Symphony Orchestra is side by side, so getting stronger and program to the benefit of youth orchestra. So that's kind of somewhat great to see. Angeles section about 5 or 10 more minutes today.
Leonard, how did you, in the time you left St. Louis, and I know you were in St. Louis for a long time, but how do you kind of check in with what's going on with your baby, the youth orchestra? Or how do you...
Same way I do with my son. I send a message every so often. Certainly during the time of the various assistant conductors who took over after me, I would always keep in touch. They would usually ask me when I was in town, could I come and do part of a rehearsal, sometimes even part of a concert. One thing we were supposed to do in this past year, I wrote a piece for them, which was actually based on the very first piece we ever rehearsed and played. But that will be, well, hopefully coming up in some time, but once we get back together. All I can really say is this is, there's nothing better for a young person than to play with other young people in this abstract fashion. In this day and age with society the way it is, we get so involved and set to, okay, this has to go this way, this goes like that, that does this. And here we are in the one field, probably in all the world, where it doesn't go the same way twice. I remember
auditions. I have a question in the chat that I do think is historically a very relevant question, even current. Christine, were the auditions in 1970 a blind audition? I don't know if a blind audition needs to be described to our viewers, but.
I don't think it was a blind audition because I remember walking out on the stage at Powell and Mr. Slatkin, you said, what are you going to play for me today? And I said, I'm going to play the Karol Szymanowski Concerto No. 2. And I said, and there's a very bad page turn. And you said, okay, go ahead. And I played and I got to that page turn and he said, you weren't kidding, were you? And so, yeah, it was just right there out in the open and there were no blind auditions then.
Not trying to trip anybody up because I know,
do they
know how blind audition has transpired in maybe the professional orchestra environment, but I believe they have been doing blind auditions to the youth orchestra.
Really?
Yeah, they are, and I to simulate what it might be like to if you were to enter into the professional arena. But I don't know if you think in the youth orchestra context, if blind auditions, how they get ready for them, or if they are something they can be ready for.
First of all, we don't know if these people in their early formative years are going to be entering the profession. So I don't try to equate anything you do on that level with the professional circumstance. It makes it even more competitive. It becomes, I want the ability, certainly with young people, to say, could you do that again? Maybe hold the instrument up a little higher, do this, do that. You want to be able to give positive feedback. And if we are not able to see them, it's not possible. I also never felt with a youth orchestra anyway that there was a discriminatory procedure or practice happening. I would hope it's not that way today.
Well, I think any kid that takes the effort to audition, I think audition may be a stressful process. I think they should always find out at the end that the work they put into preparing is what's most important to be part of trying to access music.
They need to be as comfortable as possible, and walking out not being able to see someone, that's not comfortable.
Yeah, I do think they work with them. Okay, I think we're going to be soon on, there are a lot of questions people want to know about that comment you brought about the whole bow, Leonard, but I don't know if we can address that for people now.
Which one?
There's people asking about why you talk about the whole bow.
Well, it's kind of like saying, if you were typing or doing on the computer, would you use the right hand for anything? You have these two hands, or do you not want to go up the string? Using the whole bow is equivalent of being able to have the technique you need. It's easy to diminish the amount of bow. It's not so easy if you just do a little bit to be able to expand it. You want to have that kind of sound. You can even play very softly with less pressure and use the whole bow. But the more you can practice the long strokes and have good position, good posture, relationship of left arm to right, the better off it's going to serve you in the long run.
A question on this I see in the chat, and hopefully either one could answer. I think it comes to the idea of music and experience, making it an experience for the kid and part of growing. One of the questions is, when should you consider starting your child, introducing it to music through lessons?
Through lessons on an instrument, probably.
Yeah.
I would say you want to make sure that your child has gotten to the point where the hands are well formed enough and will be independent enough to be able to do it. So we're probably talking, I mean, you could start at 3, certainly, but more than likely it's going to be 6 or 7 years, something like that. Too early, it's going to be difficult unless your child really just says, I have to have the fiddle, I have to have the clarinet.
Christine,
if your child asks for a French horn, discourage that.
Christine, when did you start playing back? Because we're, you know, if you were auditioning back then, we're going back a while. When did you start playing?
Sure, I started in the 4th grade at Bermuda Elementary School in the Ferguson-Fullerton School District.
And before, so 4th grade, help me out there on.
I was probably 10.
Yeah.
Probably 10.
Before then, had you taken any formal instruction on a musical instrument?
I had not, no.
I trying to pick up on the message. I do think music is part of a journey, and you can get on that train at any time. I think it's, if you get on it, you're more likely to stay on it. But I think there's a lot of people thinking if they haven't started at 3 or 4, are they too late, you know, or 5 or 6.
I know I've had a lot of parents ask me, you know, I have a 3-year-old or a 2-year-old, I'd like to start them. And I say the best thing you can do with your 2-year-old, your 3-year-old, your 4-year-old, sing with them. Sing, sing, sing everything you can, because all of that internal feeling we want to project into what we're doing.
And listen to all kinds of music. Share what you have listened to as an adult with your child, because later on, you need to be able to listen to what they are listening to as well as their friends. So you share this experience. I saw a nice comment from our dear Joan Brinchetti, but also a good question. The first piece we played, very easy. It was the Bach Passacaglia Fugue in C minor, transcribed by Stokowski, because we had 125 members in the first year, and we had to use all the forces, and that piece did it.
Well, I believe it's time to end this segment, and I think I want to end on behalf of the people who are participating by thanking you, Leonard, for starting the Youth Orchestra, thanking you on behalf of probably the 1,500 to 200 to 2,000 musicians who have now had the chance, that experience. Thank you, Christine, for being there and still being here to support music in the community and the Youth Orchestra. So hopefully we get a chance to talk at the end when we wrap this up, and I think I'm gonna make.
Look forward to the rest of the program.
Yeah. Great.
Thank you. Okay, are we ready to move on to our next section? I'm hoping we can bring in our next 2 guests. Our first one is Tonina Saputo, and she is a Youth Orchestra alumni, singer, songwriter, bassist, music journalist, poet, and she was named one of NPR's top 10 artists of 2018. So I think Tonina is going to help us understand how music can be a great part of your life after the Youth Orchestra. And then our second panelist will be Jonathan Chun, who is a YO alumnus and is currently a surgeon in Portland, Oregon. And if I'm correct, Jonathan, I saw you on the stage in Powell Hall in January of this year. You came back on as part of the YO 50 celebration. So without judging age, I'm going to start with the person I think who was into YO first. Jonathan, can you tell us what years you were in the YO and what kind of led you to auditioning or joining the YO at the time, the Youth Orchestra?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's such an honor to be part of this panel. I was in the Youth Orchestra from 1987 to 1992. I started in the 8th grade and then I was in there until I graduated from high school. I was A-stand in my first year, and then moved to principal my second year, and then spent 2 years as a concertmaster, and then my final year as the co-concertmaster. I started violin when I was 7. I had started on piano at age 4, and then I quit to play violin. And as I got better and more comfortable with the violin, one thing that my teacher thought was very important was for me to have an experience playing with other people rather than just being on my own. And so that's what led me to audition for the youth orchestra.
Had you auditioned or had you participated in any kind of other orchestras, like as part of your progression into the youth orchestra, or was that the first main orchestra you auditioned for?
Well, in 3rd and 4th grade, I was in a public school which had a string orchestra, so I was part of that. And then in 5th grade, my school didn't have an orchestra; it had a band, so I was not part of any sort of ensemble at that point.
Well, thank you. Hopefully that's a chance to get to know you a little bit, Jonathan, but let me switch to Tonina just for a second. Maybe Tonina, tell us a little bit about let's get to the beginnings first. What brought you to when you were in the youth orchestra and kind of how you made your way to it?
Yeah, so I was in the youth orchestra from 2008 to when I graduated high school in 2013. So I had been taking private lessons ever since I was 8 years old. I was fortunate enough to be in a school district that really nurtured and loved the arts. So I was in the Kirkwood School District, and we had the opportunity to choose our instruments from a very young age. So I think it was 2nd grade when we had the day to check out all the instruments and, play and get to meet, I think, some symphony members. So it was super special. I still remember that exact day in the cafeteria and choosing my instrument. So my sister had played violin in the youth orchestra, and I wanted to be complete opposite of her because I knew she would always be better than me. So she played violin, so I decided to play bass. And so that's been my history with the youth orchestra.
And we'll come back to other things you're doing since, but let me maybe kind of go a little back and forth, because in our first section, Leonard brought up that the youth orchestra is a part of the musical journey, but he never intended, and I think it is not the intention of youth orchestras, that it is just a pathway to a musical career. There's a lot of people, it's part of their education, but it's part of forming their person, but they go off and do other things. So I think that if I can take that to you, Jonathan, what was it about your career, what you currently do, and maybe how does music fit into your journey of getting where you do, and maybe how, even if you incorporate it today in your life?
There's a lot of different things. I think the idea of learning an instrument being a discipline, requiring careful practice, sort of what we call kind of graded increases in responsibility. There's certainly a lot of parallels to that, and either becoming a doctor, and particularly becoming a surgeon. It was interesting. When I was a resident, there was a well-known surgical educator who came and gave a lecture about education, and one of the slides that he put up was Jascha Heifetz, and his point was about the number of hours it takes to become a proficient violinist and the number of hours it takes to become a proficient surgeon. So I think to that degree, that's certainly relevant. I think the idea, having been in an orchestra, I think the idea of the sum being greater than their parts, than their individual parts, that certainly is relevant in medicine. I think particularly in what I do, it requires a lot of support. It requires a lot of help from other people with different areas of expertise. And I think that certainly plays in to a lot of the same kind of skills and learning how to interact with others that you had to do in an orchestra.
So I noticed like a lot of practice is individual, but the orchestra is a community and a group setting. Was it a fun thing for you to do? I mean, were you anxious about going into the orchestra, but then when you got there, was it fun? Did you make friends? I saw you came back in January, so hopefully there was something in the social side that made it a positive thing. Tell us a little bit just what it was like during your time, the atmosphere.
Yeah, so for me, I mean, what an experience. I think I was certainly anxious when I first started, wondering whether I would fit in, wondering, obviously being intimidated by all these older kids who were so skilled, and whether or not I would be able to keep up with them. When I was the principal second, I was 14 years old, and I think I was the youngest one, kind of sitting in that front row. And all the older players were incredibly kind to me, and kind of showed me how somebody should behave, how somebody should act as kind of a section leader, just both by just the way that they carried themselves and by just reaching out to me. I think a lot of what we did was socializing before the concert, whether it was grabbing a quick dinner. There was a lot of runs down to Wendy's on Grand Avenue there. I don't even know if it's still open but the older kids always inviting me, along and just kind of including me. I think it was, they were incredibly kind. And, Kristen Alstrom in particular was the concertmaster when I was the principal second. She played at my wedding.
Wow. Well, that kind of, I think, without trying not to cut you off, Jonathan, but there was a question about the relationship and what goes on. And as a parent, I saw my kids have that same relationship and that kind of community you had, which is, I think, a beauty to know that it's not just a present thing that it goes on, but it's a great benefit. But if I can go to you, Tonina, a little bit, because I want to talk about your experience at the youth orchestra, but then you said you were playing bass, but your musical journey since has taken you many places. So maybe see if you can help us tie it. If there's a relationship or what you think of in the youth orchestra, what reservoir you go to from that experience and what you're doing now. So
yeah, I definitely relate to what Jonathan said about being super anxious, about going to the Saturday rehearsals, because there's no hiding in an orchestra, it's like you can shadow bow all you want, but once they call in the bass section, you got to be ready. So I remember being super anxious, but also super excited because I made some of my best friends there, and I'm still super, super close to a few who I met in youth orchestra. But yeah, it definitely taught me a lot about collaboration, and being like a team player and, managing a team, because I was principal bassist the last year I was in it. So my senior year of high school. So, managing that extra responsibility. But in my everyday life, I think the collaboration aspect of it all really taught me how to be, like a manager of like a section. So that applies to my life right now, like with my team of like agents and promoters and my bandmates today, just being super communicative and, just being a team player for real.
So let me ask that, because I think, in an orchestra, I suppose the musical genre or the repertoire is, of a certain kind of, people might call it classical, but that's the repertoire. But I think Leonard was talking earlier about how there's many musics and you want the musical experience to encourage people to embrace them all. How does the genre or the repertoire you had in youth orchestra, how does that inform you, or how does that help you grow as a musician in the other work you do? And maybe tell us about that.
Yeah, definitely it has influenced like my technique. I have translated that to other stringed instruments. I do not play any other like woodwind or brass. I could never. But yeah, I've applied that to my other instruments, stringed instruments that I've picked up over the years. But also like the genres, there's still some excerpts that I had to play for auditions that I've actually like transposed into for like my other instruments. So like my sax player in my band, I've actually transposed these excerpts into for a sax player to play with some pedals and stuff. So it's really just like super interesting. I mean, you can find some like correlation, like Bach correlation in with Stevie Wonder, in his earlier records. It's just like, it's super interesting to me. So I like to, marry the different genres.
So if I can come back to you, Jonathan, real quick, to see what skills you've married from a musician. Number one, if the skills of being a violinist with your hands help you as a surgeon, and then secondly, if you're still, I saw you on stage, so I thought you played pretty good in January. How you play music now, and what kind of environments here you get to enjoy it?
So, I mean, it's hard to say that there's necessarily a direct correlation, but I think certainly, you know, manual dexterity certainly doesn't hurt. In terms of what I do now, my son plays the violin. My daughter was, but she quit to concentrate on piano. But my son has sort of stuck with it, and so a lot of what I do is trying to play with him. I was able to go on vacation a couple of months ago, and I took that opportunity to take my violin with me. So I spent a lot of time with Bach and Mozart and Beethoven, all those things that you can't really hide all the flaws in your technique. So I try to play when I can. It's obviously right now it's difficult to do any sort of ensemble.
So I may be getting ready to wrap up this section. I know people probably could love to hear you talk for both of you for a long, long time, but a favorite memory, maybe a favorite memory of you could share at the YO. I'll start with you, Jonathan, then I'll finish with Tonina.
It's hard to choose one. I think if I could choose a small series, I think it would be my very first day of the youth orchestra when we first started on the Dvorak 8 symphony. It was like a revelation, just that, you know, all these people could get together and sound like this, and that I was part of that. I had the opportunity to play the Tchaikovsky concerto as the soloist, which was another highlight. I was the concertmaster when Mr. Slatkin actually conducted us in Wagner's Prelude to Die Meistersinger, so that opportunity was obviously incredible. And then, you know, this past January, just the opportunity to be back on stage. And then
Tonina, real quick, sorry, be short. If you had a favorite memory, Jonathan currently has many, so.
Yeah, so it's exact same as Jonathan. The very first day that I was in YO, I just remember going from like my school rehearsal, you know, where it's just stringed instruments, and then going straight to YO, and then the very first note, like feeling that reverberation on the stage, like with the woodwinds, the brass, and the strings. It's the best feeling ever. So I'll never forget it.
Beautiful. Well, listen, I thank you on behalf of the family for making time. Please hold on. I think at the end we may get a chance to wrap up and say thank you to everybody together. But I think it's time to head to segment 3, and thank you again.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So if we can invite our last panel, I'll start with the musicians, if I can get them on board. We have, this is the current, this is version 5.0 or 9.0 of the youth orchestra. So we have Rich Qian, Madeline Buchowski, and Daboh Ahn. I also believe they're the musicians. I'm going to have to introduce themselves. We have, I think, Samantha Sachtleben, who's the youth orchestra manager. And then we have James Czyzewski, who's a cellist in the Symphony Orchestra, who is going to talk on how musicians work with the youth orchestra and how that goes. So let's start real quick. Rich, could you just tell us real briefly what section you're in and how long you've been in the youth orchestra and why you decided to audition in the first place?
Yeah, so I auditioned in 5th grade, I think, but didn't get in. But then in 6th grade, I auditioned and I got in. So I've been in the YO for now. This is my 7th year in the YO. And I decided to audition because before YO, I did do YPCO, which is like another orchestra program in the St. Louis area. But I just wanted to, you know, experience an orchestra program that, you know, was in Powell Hall, and, you know, just enhance my musical experience even more by joining the YO.
So what age were you when you first set foot in the youth orchestra on stage after?
Oh, so 6th grade was probably when I was like 11, I think. So yeah.
There are a lot of questions on how young you can be, so I'm going to let Samantha maybe address that at the end. Let's talk about Madeline, just real quick, how you ended up joining and the section, the youth orchestra.
Sure. So I play the cello, and this is my second year in the youth orchestra. And so how I learned about the youth orchestra was when I switched cello teachers, and my cello teacher is in the symphony orchestra. So he introduced me to the youth orchestra, and I auditioned for the first time last year. And yeah.
Well, that's great. And then that's two. Daboh, real quick, can you tell us on your journey?
Yeah, so this is also my second year in the YO. I guess I just heard about it when I first moved here, which was late elementary school. And then I wasn't really old enough to audition, and then I don't know, now I'm here.
And I think there's a lot of questions before we move on about auditions, but I think one, I don't know who referenced it, maybe Rich, but when you audition and maybe you don't make it, it's what is that like, and what does it take to get back up and go at it the next year? Because I think a lot of people are curious about that and how we encourage young people to come back because there's a disappointment. Rich, maybe not putting you on the spot, but I'm just throwing it to you.
I don't really, I was definitely probably disappointed, but also most likely motivated, just to improve my technique and just, come back the next year even stronger. So yeah.
Okay, well let's move on to positive thoughts. Okay, we'll talk. James is here on behalf of the musicians, so obviously they're the big orchestra. But you get to work with them a lot. What is it like learning from professional musicians, playing with them side by sides, rehearsals, being mentored? So, Rich, you've been there longer. What's it like? I think you may be muted. I'm not sure. Rich, did you catch that question?
Oh, sorry. Can you say that again?
My question is I don't know, it's an environment, if it's scary when people like James are on the other end of it, the equation, but what's it like working with the symphony orchestra musicians, learning from them, sitting with them side by side?
I definitely think it's a really incredible experience. I know that when I first had my first coaching and side-by-side rehearsal, I was definitely intimidated because there's always this thought that they're there to judge you or and to critique your playing. But when I actually did it and had the coaching side by side, they were really nice, and they're really just there to encourage you in your musical career and also just help you play better individually so you can play better as a section orchestra. And yeah.
Well, let me throw that to you, Madeline. Would you thinking of when you have to be around someone who's in the main symphony orchestra professional, that can be intimidating. Is it something you wish you did more of, less of, or do you like how that relationship works being in the youth orchestra with the symphony?
Well, I agree. It definitely is intimidating and a little scary, but I am really glad that we do it because, that's basically what we're doing in auditions, playing for professional musicians. And I think it's, at least for myself, when I play in front of professional musicians, I get a little more comfortable with playing in front of people in general. So I think it's something that is good and maybe I should do more of.
So we have James on the line here. So if we are trying to make it less scary, what could we tell James that he could bring back to his colleagues to help it make it less intimidating?
I don't think there's anything that the symphony musicians do that's actually intimidating. I think it's just, the name and kind of the reputation, but I don't think they're doing anything particular.
There you go. Daboh, tell us about what is the benefit to you of having access to the caliber of musician that is in the symphony orchestra and the work they want to do with you directly?
Yeah, so for me, there's definitely an aspect of playing better when I'm playing with people who, play at such a high level. And so for me, that's really beneficial. And like the other two have said, is a little bit nerve-wracking, but I do think that getting that exposure, just like you are more in tune with what you can do better, and they're like really subtle things that you don't really need someone to tell you. You just kind of pick up on your own, and I think it's really cool to be able to, yeah, improve, I guess, on your own.
Right, I'm going to invite Samantha real quick because Samantha is the youth orchestra manager. Samantha, can you just kind of bridge to it before we talk to James, and bridge how you as youth orchestra manager try and manage all this and put them in sync with the symphony orchestra and how what you are trying to accomplish with that relationship?
I think that the relationship between the students and the symphony musicians is one of the highlights of our program. And each regular season, the students have 2 to 3 sectionals each concert cycle with the musicians to help prepare. And we also have one side-by-side rehearsal each year, usually around February, which is just a rehearsal for the students, but they sit on stage and share a music stand with a member of the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. And so in a typical year, those are the activities that we do together. This season, since a lot of our activities have moved online, and we are having our first virtual experience, as are so many schools and programs, that was actually the main thing that we focused on, is really building and improving that relationship with the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra musicians. And so instead of meeting just 2 or 3 times a concert cycle, they've had sectionals with their St. Louis Symphony musicians every single week. And the musicians have led master classes over a wide variety of topics. And so it's been really great to help to foster and build that connection.
Great. Well, I thank you, Samantha, because I think that allows us, James, Mr. Czyzewski, welcome to the conversation. And just so you know, you speak for the whole orchestra, so there's no burden in any answer you give. But tell us a little bit about how working with the youth orchestra and having a youth orchestra as part of the St. Louis Symphony family, what it feels like for you, maybe how it inspires you, and then maybe talk about how you interact and the value in that relationship. Tell us. It's all yours, James.
Okay, I'll start with, as a musician in the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, I, grew up in Alaska, but there was this Fairbanks Youth Orchestra where I grew up, and I started playing in that youth orchestra in the 4th grade. And that sort of laid the foundation for my own desire to one day play in an orchestra. So I see there's an incredible amount of value in just exposing young musicians to orchestral music. I think for many of them, it's the first time they get to play, even I'm sure, in a lot of cases, for me especially, I played with other groups of string instruments, but I had never heard a flute before on stage or sat behind a trombone, and just being exposed to all those different sounds. I still remember being in 4th grade and hearing there's a beautiful flute solo in the Dvorak 9th Symphony. And I heard it, and I'd never really heard a flute before. And I thought it was the most amazing thing I'd ever heard. And so there's these little things that stick with you through the years. So it definitely made me interested in pursuing orchestral playing. So I think just if nothing else, it gives all the students, first of all, great exposure to this classical music, orchestral repertoire, but also perhaps an idea of maybe that it could be something that, it's not many of them that will choose to pursue this as a career, but it is a great way of showing them what's possible, I think. And for the St. Louis Symphony musicians that work with the YO, it's a great reminder of where we all came from, but it's a responsibility that I think all of us take very seriously in trying to mentor these young musicians in the best way. I mean, there's so many things to think about when it comes to how our relationships are. I think the most important thing we have to do is be great role models of what's expected and what's possible. Even if it's just showing up with a pencil for the side by side to show them that we remember, it's important to have a pencil, or how to listen to the conductor carefully when they're talking, little things like that. But also as a role model, it's giving them an idea that if they do decide to spend hours and hours practicing and focusing on their craft, everybody has everybody goes to the doctor and knows they have teachers all their life, but not very many, I don't think until that point, very many of them know that there's professional orchestral musicians out there in the world. And there is an end game to sort of practicing and all those endless hours that if they choose to pursue it as a profession as well.
I think, and Samantha addressed this, James, thank you, that in this time of COVID, where there's not as much live performances on PAL by the Symphony Orchestra, that the musicians have used the outlet of mentoring and teaching and other things as a way to engage more and give more at this time. Tell us a little bit more about what more you're doing at this time as regards to youth orchestra and maybe other places.
Yeah, so I actually took part in this fall. For over 3 subsequent or consecutive weeks, I had the pleasure of coaching and Madeline is one of the youth orchestra cellists that I was coaching. But I had an hour with them 3 Saturdays in a row. And I think it's, Samantha left it sort of up to the coaches themselves, the musicians, to sort of decide what they wanted to emphasize and work on, which I think was great. And so personally, what we did was I just wanted everybody in the cello section to have a chance to play for each other and to not only have a performance experience, but also, since they're not getting really much of a chance to hear each other or know each other as cellists, to just be able to see the music, the musician in all of their peers that right now is mostly just a face on a Zoom screen. So,
well, I say the youth orchestra may not be spending as much time together, which is unfortunate, but I'd say on behalf of the St. Louis family, thank you to the orchestra musicians for making yourselves more available. So getting a little less of each other, but a bit more of you guys, which is sometimes maybe not a bad thing, who knows, but let's give you the benefit of the doubt on that one, James. But so I think we're getting close to wrapping the meeting up, and I was wondering if what the most important thing at the moment that the youth orchestra is just doing for you. So let's start with the current musicians. Just what is it about being in the youth orchestra? What's most important about that for you? And let's start with you, Rich, real quick.
I think just over the years I've been in the YO, the most important thing is probably like the community of musicians that I get to interact with, just by being in the orchestra, you're surrounded by like so many talented people that are like a wide range of ages, and also that, just come from a variety of backgrounds.
And Rich, how are you keeping that connectivity in COVID times? How are you staying in contact with your youth orchestra friends?
Yeah, so a lot of my friends actually graduated last year, but there are still some people that still in there right now. It's, if I do say, it's kind of hard to stay in contact because we're not able to meet and hang out. But we, during the breakout rooms, when we with our coaches, we talk and just interact.
Not trying to be too rude, Madeline, I go around to you real quick. What's important about the youth orchestra to you in this moment or this last for you?
Well, for me, I think that these last couple years in the youth orchestra, I've become a much more confident player, and I just feel more confident in general regarding my abilities. And also, I've been exposed to kind of what a future in music would look like, whereas before I didn't really see that as even a possibility.
Wow. And then let me go to Daboh. Super, thank you, Daboh. So what's important about the youth orchestra to you right now?
Yeah, I guess I can kind of just combine what the other two said, in that like I've become a lot more confident in myself as a musician, like being able to make friends who are also like really high level players and being able to talk to them about music. And it's just like a different sense of friendship, I think.
Okay, and I'm going to skip over Samantha because I'm going to ask Christine, our guest. Christine, the youth orchestra today, or in your past experience, what's most important to you when you think of the youth orchestra?
I think when I think of the youth orchestra, so many of the comments that have already been made resonate with me. And the camaraderie that I experienced, that we all supported each other, we looked forward to seeing each other, and the amazing music that we could make on the stage at Powell was really, it was just unbelievable for us at that time. Just to be in high school, junior high, it was just a fabulous experience. But it was the camaraderie, I would say.
Thank you, Christine. Jonathan?
This it literally spans generations, right? And so
Yes, it does.
it's just timeless.
And I'm going to skip to Tonina, and I might have Leonard wrap this one up. Tonina, to you, when you're thinking of the youth orchestra experience, if there is a most important, what it is?
I would say friendship.
That's pretty great. And Leonard is kind of, well, we call it your baby, but you're sitting here and maybe you can reflect and look forward. What would you say is most important, what happened, and maybe what might happen in the future?
I think all you have to do is look and listen to what we've heard during this hour. We have an incredibly diverse group of people, and yet we've never had to talk about where we come from. We just exist together. It's my eventual hope that how youth orchestras are, not just in St. Louis, but all over this country, start to reflect the wide spectrum of who we are in this country. We are the model for what the country should be, and we always have been. So my greatest pleasure is so looking to how we started, to see where we've grown, see the passion and the intellect all of you have brought. I cannot do anything but tell you how proud I am and continue to be about the growth, not just from the musicians, but from the people who support them, for all the people that understand why the youth orchestra is important and what it means, not just for today, but going forward. I wish everybody had the opportunity to understand what all of you bring as people, as individuals. I hope that this time, either past or present in the youth orchestra, has helped shape who you will become, and that it makes you positive and look forward by, at the same time, looking at the past.
Well, thank you for those beautiful words. Samantha, can you let us know what the youth orchestra people could access from the youth orchestra real quickly this year before we hopefully get back live on stage in next year?
Yes, I was just typing this in the chat. If you would like to know a little bit more about what this virtual fall has looked like, the youth orchestra is going to host a fall showcase this Sunday, November 22nd. It'll be a similar format, another webinar on Zoom like this, but it will be 100% the students, maybe a couple of coaches. And unlike a concert where we see the faces on stage, we'll have a chance to really hear from a lot of the students as they describe the different activities that they've done with their coaches and the experiences that they've had this fall. We are crafting the spring cycle, the spring session now, and we're looking at as many different opportunities as we can safely pursue. And we have some great things in mind, and I look forward to sharing that announcement soon. But we will continue making music and encouraging these students to become the best musicians that they can be in any way that we can.
Well, on behalf, as the host, on behalf of the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, thank you all for making this time. More importantly, thank you all for what you have done and continue to do. And for the young people playing music out there, we look forward to hearing your next concert. And we miss hearing your music, but we're excited to hear it and keep playing. So I'm going to wrap this up on behalf of the Symphony. The next Lunch and Learn is December 6th. And also please stay engaged with the Symphony online through social media, YouTube, St. Louis Stories. And that is the end of our webinar, or whatever we call this lunch and learn for today. So again, thank you very much, and see you all again somewhere soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.